Okay, here we are. Welcome back again. And for our second presentation today, I'm happy to have Edward Hall here, the CEO of Bioextrax. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Edward.
Thanks a lot, Oliver, and thanks to everyone who's taking the time to watch and listen to my presentation. I'm Edward. I'm the CEO of Bioextrax. Bioextrax is one of these smaller companies that Marcus mentioned that decided or took the decision to become a listed company fairly early. And what we are going to do today is that I will start by giving a brief overview of us as a company, our various business areas, and a few kind of background details about us. Then I will move over to talk about the bioplastic market, because as you will hear during my introduction, our main focus is to develop processes for a certain type of bioplastic called PHAs. So I will talk a bit about that market in general and kind of how we fit into it. And then I will go over to talk about our technologies and the various customer projects that we're involved in. Second, or lastly, before the summary, I will present our upscaling facility. This is something that we recently invested in, and that is making a fairly big difference for us as a company. So I will focus, or I will dive a bit into that, and then I will end with a bit of a summary, the 5 key things that I want you to take with you from this presentation. So if you're, if you fall asleep during the presentation, that's okay, because I will give you the highlights towards the end. And then, of course, I'm looking forward to the Q&A session at the end. But as mentioned, I will start by giving you an overview of us as a company. We do industrial biotechnology that is different from medical biotechnology, which is the kind of biotechnology that a lot of people think about. Within industrial biotechnology, or white biotechnology as it's often called, you use microbes in different kinds of industrial processes. And in our case, we use bacteria. So we use bacteria in everything we do. And this we have been doing since 2014, when we were founded based on research at the Department of Biotechnology at Lund University here in Sweden. And we did an IPO at Spotlight actually in 2020, and we changed listing to Nasdaq First North in November 2022. And we work with a lot of different customers in different stages. We have some very early stage evaluation projects, and we have some very mature licensing deals. So we have a pretty broad pipeline, if you so will. And when I talk about customer projects, I talk about projects where the end goal is a license deal. So we are not a producing company. We're not developing technologies to produce and sell material. We're developing technologies to out-license those technologies. And we have stayed in Lund. This is where we have our offices and our R&D facility, and also our upscaling unit that I will talk a bit about. And we have roughly 15 full-time equivalents in the company. We have more employees than that, but not everyone is full-time. And here to the right on the slide, you can see our different business areas. We have 3 different business areas. 2 of them are based on poultry feathers, so feathers from chickens and turkeys. And depending on how we control the process, we get 2 different kinds of materials from the feathers. It's hydrolyzed protein, which can be used as protein ingredients into feed applications, for instance. And it's keratin microfibers, which can be used as an additive into bioplastics, for instance. So those are 2 business areas based on feathers. But our main focus is to the left on this slide, and that's around PHAs, or polyhydroxyalkanoates. PHAs is a group of polymer, and what they have in common is that they're bio-based, which means that there are no fossil material that goes into the production of the PHAs, and they are biodegradable. So if you throw them into nature, they biodegrade without leaving any microplastics or any toxic materials or anything like that. And I think it's fair to say that we spend the vast majority of our resources on this left side of the technology overview, the PHA. And the reason why there are two products marked out on under the PHA business area is both PHA and it's the co-product, which is the hydrolyzed SCP. SCP stands for single cell protein. That's because a unique feature of our PHA producing technology is that we generate a co-product in the form of hydrolyzed single cell protein, which is basically amino acids, peptides, oligopeptides, which can be used as ingredients into various kinds of feed. It can also be used for human consumption, but we're focusing on the animal feed market. But I will come more back to more details around this further on. And as mentioned, I'm going to start to talk a bit about the bioplastic market, which of course sits in the wider scope of the plastic market. And I think everyone can probably guess that the conventional plastic market is very, very large. Roughly 400 million tons of plastics are produced every year. What may or may not come to as a surprise to some of you is that the conventional plastic market is still growing very quickly. Plastic, as you have probably seen, is getting a lot of bad press, both when it comes to pollution of the environment, but also when it comes to the CO2 emissions in connection with the production. But despite this, the plastic industry is still growing very quickly. What is growing quicker, though, than the plastic market at large is the bioplastic market. This is, of course, triggered by a lot of legislation. It's also consumer behavior, but the main trigger is legislation. We have a few examples. One is the Biden administration's recent decision to replace all conventional plastic with bio-based or not all, 90%, sorry, of all conventional plastic with bio-based alternatives by 2040. There was a lot of legislation coming within the EU over the coming years. There is also more local legislation, both on a state level in the US and in various jurisdictions in the EU. India is implementing a large ban and so on. So there are a lot of macro forces that are forcing the transition into bioplastics. And when I talk about bioplastics, I mean both bio-based, so a source from renewable sources, and biodegradable, meaning that that it's biodegraded. It disappears if it's left in nature. But of course, Bioextrax is not developing technologies for bioplastics in general. We are developing technologies for a certain kind of bioplastic, which is called PHA. So I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive into the forecasts for PHA. And what I've done on this slide is that to the left here, I show the data from the 2021 European Bioplastic Association report. And to the right, I show data from the 2022 European Bioplastic report. And what we can see is that while of course both of them forecast a big growth in bioplastic in general production and consumption over the coming 4, 5, 6 years, what is interesting is that the forecasts for bioplastics in general are actually turned down a bit. So in the 2021 report indicates that by 2026, roughly 7.6 million tons of bioplastics would be produced, whereas the newer report says that 1 year later, only 6.3 million tons of bioplastics would be produced. So that's actually a reduction of the forecast, even though, of course, the growth rate is still expected to be very high. But if we look at PHA's share, we can see that in the 2021 report, it was estimated to be 6.4% of the total bioplastic production by 2026. And that has been increased to almost 9% by 2027. So what we see is that the overall forecast for bioplastics is turned down, but the forecast for PHA, or polyhydroxyalkanoates, is actually increased very significantly. And why is that? Well, that's because or to answer that, we need to go back to the actual problems with conventional plastics. And those are three things. This is not rocket science. This is obvious to most people, but it is about the pollution of plastic, the plastic pollutions in oceans, in marine environments, but also in soil environments. It's about the massive carbon footprint of plastic production and consumption. And it is about the plan to use more and more, which I talked about before. And what is unique about PHA is three things. It's first of all, that it's bio-based. It's secondly, that it's biodegradable. But most importantly is the third thing, and that's that it's a group of polymers. So it's not one single polymer. It's a group of polymer that has characteristics that makes it suitable replacement for the majority of all conventional plastics. You have PHA types that are very similar to PP or polypropylene. This is, for instance, like this kind of pen. It's a polypropylene-based pen. It's very rigid, but you also have PHA types that are almost like rubber, very soft. So you have a very wide range of different material properties. And this is what makes PHA unique compared to other bioplastics, because each of those bioplastics can only replace maybe one or two conventional plastics, but PHAs can replace the majority of all conventional plastics that are in circulation. And for the ones who are a bit chemically interested, or maybe even have some polymer chemistry background, to the right here of this slide, you can see some of the chemical compositions of different kinds of PHAs. So over to how we fit into this very rapidly growing market. And I will focus here primarily on PHAs, but I will also say a few words about our feather-based technologies. But I will start a bit by a small biotechnology lecture to show you how PHAs are produced. And this slide should be read from left to right. This is the production process. So you start with some kind of organic or carbon-rich materials. This can be sucrose from sugar beets, or glucose, which is a co-product from starch production. It can be different kinds of waste materials from the paper and pulp industry, for instance. It can be waste from different kinds of food processing industries. It can also be municipal wastewater, so toilet water can be used to produce PHAs. You can also use different kinds of vegetable oils like rapeseed oil, canola oil, or sorry, that's the same thing, but palm oil and so on as well. But of course, you want to avoid palm oil for a number of reasons. So what you do then is that you take this carbon source and you grow bacteria on that carbon source. And after a while, you cut the access to certain nutrients, including nitrogen, and you starve the bacteria and you stress the bacteria. And what the bacteria then start to do is that they start to take the carbon in the surroundings, in the bioreactor that you're using, and they start to synthesize that and store it inside the bacteria cells. This is conceptually roughly how humans store fat. We do that to have a reserve for the future when we need it. So after this step, which we call the fermentation step, you have bacteria that are filled with these plastic granules, and it's you can see a picture of what it looks like here. Under the fermentation heading, you have bacteria. This is the kind of black shapes, and inside you have the white granules or white balls, and that's the PHA. And for this step, we have a patent that's been granted, including in the EU, but also in China and a number of other jurisdictions in both North and South America, and also in Asia. But after this step, you need a way to get the granules out of the bacteria. And this is really where the industry have been struggling so far, because they have used methods that are extremely energy and chemical consuming. So it really requires a lot of consumables, becomes very expensive, and you kind of also lose your sustainability argument if you use a lot of chemicals and a lot of energy to produce the polymers. So what we do instead, and this is very much the core of our company from a technical perspective, is that we add a second bacteria. This is not a genetically modified bacteria, it's a natural bacteria. And what our bacteria does, or what they do, is that they release enzymes which breaks down the cell walls of the PHA producing bacteria. So basically, again, if you look at this picture under the fermentation heading, the enzymes that are produced by our bacteria hydrolyzes or breaks down everything that's black in this picture, thereby releasing the granules. This has a number of benefits. First of all, it's completely bio-based, so we use no chemicals in the process, which is, of course, good from a storytelling perspective, but it's also good from a overall sustainability perspective. It's a very cost-efficient method because there are no consumables that are consumed in the process. We don't need to add a lot of chemicals that are consumed, which also results in very expensive wastewater treatment. Instead, we only add our bacteria, and our bacteria use the biomass from the previous step as substrate or raw material to grow. A third benefit is that we generate a co-product, which is the cell walls of the PHA producing bacteria, or the cell walls of the first bacteria, which is broken down into amino acids and peptides and oligopeptides. And this can be used as a protein ingredient in feed because the cell walls are roughly 50% protein. And then the last benefit is that we leave the PHA granules completely intact. So we get no degradation or no loss of molecular weight. This is important for certain applications. For others, it doesn't matter at all. But for certain applications, it is very, very important. That's more a technical question that I'm happy to discuss if somebody has a more, come from a polymer background. But if you're not, it's just enough to know that we leave the molecular weight intact, which is important for certain applications. But then we also have the feather-based technologies. These are very easy or simple processes. We take the feathers directly from the slaughterhouse, we sterilize them, we mix them with our bacteria. Again, these are non-GMO or also called wild-type bacteria. And then, depending on how we run a process that takes roughly 24 hours. And then out on the other side comes either the hydrolyzed protein or the microfibers, depending on how we steer the process. And this hydrolyzed protein is a water-soluble powder that can be used as a protein ingredient in animal feed. You can also, again, use it for human consumption, but it's a bit bitter in its taste. But the key thing here is that feathers are roughly 90% protein. So, of course, you want to utilize this in the best way possible. And the microfibers that we get, this is a material that only we in the world can produce. We're the first one to produce this kind of microfibers. So we're and I mean, that's of course a big, very interesting opportunity, but it's also a big challenge because we are very much in the early phases of trying to figure out what these microfibers can be used for. And actually, we had a very big breakthrough in our lab as late as last week when we managed to upscale this microfiber production for the first time to pilot scale, which in turn means that we can generate some fairly large quantities of microfibers that we can send out for testing with different kinds of customers. And here we have a long range of different projects ongoing, including with H&M, with a number of large packaging producers across Europe and so on. And we do in our quarterly reports, we give an overview of our most important projects that are currently ongoing. But that's in Swedish, but it's still, I mean, with Google Translate, you can get quite a lot of information about those various projects. But here I taken out the absolutely most important projects that are ongoing. And we have, at the top, we have a very long running relationship with one of the world's largest chemical companies. And what they are doing is that they are evaluating a type of PHA that only we can produce for applications in sunscreen. So in sunscreen, you have a film that is kind of capturing the active ingredients and make sure that it sticks to the skin, that you really want to have biodegradable because it's naturally washed out to the sea when you go for a swim or when you shower, after you've been to the beach, for instance. So they are evaluating our PHA to be used in this kind of application. We have a similar kind of project with one of the world's 3 largest cosmetic companies. In their case, it's for lipstick primarily, but its function is the same, to work as a film former to make sure that the active ingredient stays to the skin. For lipsticks, of course, you don't want to make sure that the lipstick is, kiss-proof, if you so will. Then we have a customer fund. I should also mention that this project with the cosmetic company is funded by the cosmetic company. Then we have a project with one of the world's 3 largest candy producers, and what they are investigating is the possibility to use PHA in chewing gum. In a normal chewing gum, you have roughly 7 different types of polymers that fills different kinds of functions. You have one, which is the gum base, which kind of makes the texture and the feel of the chewing gum. And this is what they want to replace with the same type of PHA, actually, that we're working with the chemical and the cosmetic company. And again, this is also financed by the candy producer. And then we have a few other projects. We're working with one of the world's largest sugar producers in a very large project that also includes the 6 biggest compounders of bioplastics in Europe. And the idea behind this project is to use the sucrose, or the sugar, from the sugar producer to produce PHA, and then we use the compounders as a go-to-market channel. And then for the feather technology, we have a very long-running collaboration with one of Europe's largest waste management companies. And they have currently an option for a global eternal exclusive license for one of the feather technologies, and that's the technology to convert the feather into hydrolyzed protein for feed applications. We have also have a project with the largest bioplastic producer in the EU, and then we have a number of EU projects and so on, including one that's financed by the EU. I just want to mention that. And one project that isn't included here for some reason, I just forgot to include it, is that we recently signed a license agreement with an American PHA producer, and some of our team is currently in the US to install our technology at their facility. And if everything goes well, that will be upscaled to commercial scale before New Year's this year. So that's, of course, very exciting developments for us. I will say a few words about our upscaling facility before I move over to team and then the summary at the end. So we moved to new facilities in February this year. When we took over, it was used as a warehouse, so for something completely different. But the reason why we moved was that we realized during primarily 2022 that we had a large need within the company to demonstrate our technologies in larger scale. As mentioned before, we're not a producing company. We are a technology developer that wants to out-license, but it's very difficult to out-license if you have only showed your technology in small scale, because then the customer needs to take the full risk of the upscaling. So we made the investment in an upscaling facility. It was delivered during the spring of this year, and it was installed during the summer. And now for the last 1.5 months or so, it's been running. And here to the right of this slide, you can see the upscaling facility. To the left, I will come back to what the sizes of reactors and so on. But circled in red, you can see the largest scale we had before. And this is just to exemplify what big step this is. And it has worked really well. We've had visitors more or less every week since this started running here to see and check the to actually watch the scalability of our different processes. And importantly, we can actually use exactly the same equipment for all our processes, regardless of whether it is for feathers or it is for this bioplastic called PHA. But it's important, again, to highlight that this is not a production facility. We can produce material that we can use for samples and so on, and we can actually make quite a lot of money from just selling these samples. But the main purpose is to demonstrate our technologies, thereby accelerating our license sales. And the largest fermenters we have in this upscaling facility is two 1,000-liter fermenters. This is, of course, not by accident that we have chosen two, and the 1,000-liter scale is what we consider to be the last step before you go to full commercial scale. This can produce roughly 50-60 kilograms of material every week, but again, it's not a production facility, it's a demonstration facility. I want to say a few words about our team. We have roughly 15 full-time equivalents, as I mentioned, but a few of our management team is listed here on this slide. We have Per-Erik Velin. He has roughly 25 years of experience from various kinds of business development positions in large international chemical companies, including Perstorp, which is a large Swedish specialty chemical company, and Saint-Gobain, which is I think it's French. I'm actually a bit uncertain now. And he has, for instance, been the site manager for different production facilities and so on. We have Claes Ingstop at the bottom right corner. He's also from Perstorp originally, where he was, for instance, a plant manager and site manager at different polymer producing facilities, and he was also responsible for the engineering group within Perstorp for a number of years. Down to the left is Mohammed Ibrahim. He's the founder, he's the real inventor behind our technologies, and he has spent roughly 20 years within research focused on PHA, including in Münster in Germany, where he did his PhD, focused on PHA, and then he founded the company back in 2014. And me, I have a legal background primarily, but I've been the CEO of Bioextrax since 2017. So of course, I've picked up one or two things about biotechnology and microbiology during these years. And I promise to kind of leave you off with a quick summary, the 5 most important things that I want you to take with you from this presentation. And those 5 things are the following. First of all, it's that PHA is a group of polymer that is bio-based and biodegradable. And PHA is generally considered to be the bioplastic with the largest potential to replace fossil-based plastics. And Bioextrax, we have developed a completely bio-based method that can produce high quality PHA in a more sustainable and cheaper way than the competition. And in addition to our PHA technologies, we also have technologies to convert feathers into both microfibers and hydrolyzed protein, which can be used as a feed ingredient. And we have recently invested in an upscaling facility, which is now operating, which is used to accelerate our licensing model by validating our technology in larger scale. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Edward. A very interesting presentation. We already have some questions there, but let me just start off with the license agreement. So you mentioned that you signed a license agreement with a US company on the PHA technology. So is that your first license agreement? And generally, how would you structure these licenses?
So it's not our first agreement, but we were, well, I would say a bit unlucky. We signed a license agreement with the customer roughly 1.5 years back, but that customer went bankrupt. That wasn't our fault. So it is our second, but it's the only one we have running at the moment. And the way we structure it is that we have 3 different streams of money coming into to the company. So we have, first of all, one kind of running license fee that kind of gives the customer freedom to operate while they are implementing and upscaling our technology. In the case of this American company, that monthly fee is $25,000. So of course, it's not a huge number, but it does make a difference for a company of our size, which has a monthly burn rate of roughly $150,000. So that is one part of the income stream. And then once they have started installing it in larger scale, we keep on taking a monthly or quarterly license for the right to use it in that scale. And then the last and hopefully the largest chunk is the royalty, which is per produced kilogram.
Okay, and you mentioned quite a lot of projects, so sunscreen, the lipstick, the chewing gum, and so on. Can you say anything about kind of your feeling of the timeline on these projects, or is it too difficult to basically say when something might actually come your way?
Yes, so they are, so 2 of these 3 projects, the lipstick, chewing gum, and the sunscreen, they are financed by the potential customer here. So of course we do get some revenue from them already, but I mean that's not, it's small in comparison for what we're hoping for in the future. But they are scaling up. So if we take chewing gum, for instance, they, after the next phase is that they will get a couple of 100 kilograms of PHA, and after that it's on the ton scale. And for that we can charge quite a lot. But kind of from now to full commercial production, it's roughly 2 to 3 years for those applications. But importantly, since we are not producers, we're out licensors, we do of course hope to be able to out license our technology and make significant revenue before they start production, because it's not us who will start production, it's a third party, and they will have to license the technology from us before they actually start production.
Okay, turning to the questions from the auditorium. So the first one, I think you kind of hinted at one thing. Are you receiving any kind of public funding? You mentioned the EU project.
Yeah, so we are in a couple of different EU projects. For instance, this one with Carrefour, and that generates like 200,000 euros per year, and we are in a number of similar ones. We could probably do more here because, of course, this is a very hot topic within the EU. But we do also have. Well, we do see that it does take a lot of time, and it kind of moves your focus away from what really matters, which is customer relations. And we are a bit too far now to really focus on, for instance, EU funding, because they really want slightly lower TRL levels, or rather they either want very low TRL or technical readiness levels, or they want to finance companies that is actually setting up their own production because they want to support EU jobs, as an example. And we are neither. So this is not a focus. We join funding applications that others are writing, because that's, you can get some fairly easy revenue and good contacts in that way, but we're not taking initiatives ourselves.
Okay, the next question is, first of all, thank you for your excellent presentation. So I wanted to hand that along. And what are the top risks in scaling your technology in the client setting?
So I think when it comes to scaling in general, we have overcome the biggest hurdle now via this upscaling unit, where we have managed to scale it to the 1,000-liter scale. That's really where the biggest risk take place. There are, well, I'm not going to say no technical risks, but very small technical risks when it comes to upscaling from that to commercial scale. And that is regardless of where it is, because we use very standard biotechnology equipment. We just buy our equipment off the shelf, any supplier in China or anywhere else. So that there is very little technical risk in upscaling at our customers, actually. So that is yeah.
Does it make a big difference what kind of feedstock you use? Because you mentioned you could use all kind of feedstock containing carbon. So is that kind of a risk when the customer or the license taker uses different feedstock?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we use so within Bioextrax we use what's called pure cultures. So this is monosugars. So this can be well, sucrose is actually not a monosugar, but it is a well-defined homogeneous sugar type. So that we can use. The same thing with glucose or vegetable oils and so on. The waste-based PHAs, for that, we don't have a technology to do the first step, which is what I call the fermentation step, where you grow the bacteria on the carbon source. So for those projects, we only supply the extraction. So that is absolutely a very good point. In the current upscaling we are doing, or the tech transfer and upscaling we're doing to the US, sucrose is used as the raw material. They could just as well use glucose, for instance. They could also use glycerol or something like that. But if they want to use wastewater, then we will have to have a partner that brings the technology for the accumulation. And as I mentioned before, our core competence is the extraction, taking the polymers out of the bacteria. That is what sets us apart from the competition.
Okay, very good. So you mentioned the 150K per month cash you use, and of course you also have some cash inflow. Now the question is what your current cash situation is. Probably also, how long you could last without, let's say, another capital increase, and how Spotlight has helped you with that.
Yeah, so first of all, we're not on Spotlight anymore. We were on Spotlight until, I mean, of course, it's being public, if we start there, has been a good way, especially in 2020 and 2021, to raise capital. Of course, the last 2 years or last 1.5 years has been more difficult from that perspective. But as far as I know, it's a fairly unique opportunity as a small company to reach a lot of potential investors being publicly traded. So I think it has helped us. Our current cash situation is fairly good. I don't think I'm allowed to comment on exactly how our current cash situation today, but according to the latest quarterly report, which was published at the end of August, and which includes the second quarter, at that point we had roughly 1.2 million euros on the bank account, if I remember correctly. I'm not 100% sure about the exact number. And then we got another 1 million euros now through a warrant exercise program, which was utilized to 96%. So we have a fairly good cash balance, especially considering the income we have. So we're not fundraising at the moment, to make that clear. But what we are interested in general is strategically relevant investors, and of course we want the wider investment community to know as much as possible about us as a company.
And maybe you could comment on the latest shareholder structure after the warrant exercises.
Sorry, again, can you repeat?
Could you give an insight on the latest shareholder structure of Bioextrax?
Yes, sure. So we have, our largest shareholder is Mohammed Ibrahim, who is the founder, who I mentioned. before, and the second largest is Rashni Hattikaul, who is on the board and who was the professor of at the department where Mohammed was when he developed the technologies. And then we have a number of or we have 2 or 3 individuals that's been following the company for quite some time, including the first external investor we have, who continued to buy shares. And then we have me and a few other kind of people who are involved in the company. And then we have 4,000 others. That's, but our largest shareholder, Mohammed, he has roughly 8% of the company.
And market cap roughly is?
So the market cap is around 10 million euros.
Okay, very good. So we have one more question here, and that question is why you switched from Spotlight to Nordic Growth. You have to be careful. I think Marcus is still listening.
Yeah, I have nothing. No, but I have nothing bad to say about Spotlight. The main reason was that we made the assessment that in order to attract international investors, in particular international institutional investors, being on NASDAQ is helpful, and it also gives a larger, bigger credibility to have that brand name. Because of course in Sweden Spotlight is well known, and I think Spotlight is a very good place to be, but it's not as well known internationally.
Okay, very good. I think we're done with the current questions. So just as a reminder, if you have any further questions, please put them in the chat. And you can also put them in German if that makes you feel more comfortable. So let's just wait a minute or two to see if there's anything else coming up. Do you think we missed anything important in terms of questions or points of discussion, Edward?
No, I don't think so. I think I think I managed to convey what I wanted.
Yeah. So maybe just one final question from my side. So the origins of the company, was it first the feather-based protein thing or the PHAs? And where did it come from? Was it a spin-off from university, or maybe you can just say something how you originated?
Absolutely, yeah. So the original technology was the extraction of PHA from PHA-producing bacteria, and that was based on Mohammed spending a lot of years developing various PHA-related technologies, including he did a project for BASF, for instance, around PHAs, and he noticed that what always become the kind of what stopped companies from really kind of pursuing PHA was the extraction, because the methods that were available were extremely expensive and very environmentally problematic. So that was kind of the origin of the company, that they found this method to extract it in a better way. And then he had done actually his master work on feathers. So, once he had a company, he decided to do both in parallel. But it's always been PHA extraction that has been our main thing. But the reason why we keep it in the same company, it is that you need a similar kind of equipment to do the work. So there are a lot of synergies from an equipment side, and you need very similar competences to develop the technologies as well. So therefore it makes sense. But I think further down the line, there will be a point where we will spin out either the feather part or the PHA part.
Okay, makes sense. And maybe finally, the question from my side is, do you actually feel that the interest in your company has increased since the public awareness on this plastics problem has, become more acute?
I think public awareness matters less. What it really matters is legislation. So there you can see, so there is a coming EU ban against what's called intentionally added non-biodegradable microplastics. And that has made all the difference. The day after, you saw completely different interest from, cosmetic or companies like the cosmetic company, like the chemical company that is desperate to find solutions to that. So legislation matters much more than consumer behavior or public opinion, but of course there is there is a causal link in both directions between legislation and public opinion.
Yeah, and actually we do have a last-minute entry in the chat room. When do you plan to break even? You have some high-end customers. Are they potential strategic investors?
To start with the last, then definitely yes. Either directly into Bioextrax or in a production facility using our technology. Because, for instance, the chewing gum company, the amount of material that they will need will be far more than you can produce from one production facility. So, of course, there would be a interest from them to support the production. We don't publish any financial forecasts. So now I'm coming back to the question about when we plan to break even. One industrial scale customer is enough for us to break even. So that's what I can say. We're not selling 1,000 licenses, and that's enough to make us break even. One full scale production using our technology is enough.
Great, excellent presentation. Thank you very much, Edward. And I'll hand over to you for finishing words if you want to have them.
No, I think I've said enough.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, and see you everybody in 5 minutes for the next presentation, which will be Timo Hansen on risk intelligence. So thanks again, Edward.
Thank you.